Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. If you haven't picked up this book already, I highly recommend that you do. And despite it being one of the most overhyped and over-recommended books in the self-development sphere, it is well worth it. I believe wholeheartedly that even though this book is super mainstream at this point, and you've probably heard it recommended to you dozens and dozens of times, and if you're one of those people like I was, who had never actually bothered to pick it up but kept hearing it mentioned over and over again, eventually I just kind of plugged my ears and stopped listening whenever it would come up in a podcast or a YouTube video. So this is my call to action to you to just go and pick it up and just start reading it. However, with that being said, I do want to give a cautionary tale based off of my own personal experience when I first tried to read this book a couple years ago. Now, because of the fact that it was so overhyped, when I eventually went to go pick it up, I was very disappointed in the book. I thought that it was too simple, it was too vague, it was hard to follow, hard to read. I was trying to just plow through it as if it was any other book in the self-development sphere, where it's got a very clear cadence and structure to the entire book, and the chapters kind of play into each other and build on one another. This is not a traditional book. This is simply the transcribing of one man's journal entries that have been passed on for many, many centuries. And so with that in mind, this book is not meant to be read as if it were a manual on life or some type of how-to book where you just kind of go from point A to point B to C, etc., all the way through, and you can read it in one sitting. You can probably do that with this book, but I don't recommend it, because of the fact that these are small, bite-sized journal entries that pack a lot of punch in a very short period of time. I prefer to carefully digest this book in bite-sized pieces. I have found personally, upon picking it up a second time more recently, that as I changed my approach to fit the actual book itself, I've been able to get way more out of it. And so, with all that in mind, I would like to share my 3 favorite Marcus Aurelius quotes from Meditations that have genuinely improved my life, and I think will improve your life too. So, the first one that we are going to start with is a quote that is very relevant to anyone who suffers from people-pleasing or being scared of what other people think of them and holds themselves back from taking certain actions because of that. That is something that I struggled with a lot in my life, and so as I read this quote the first time, it really allowed me to have a little bit of perspective on why the way that I was behaving wasn't actually very conducive to success. So, this is the last half of quote number 4 from book 3. A man should hold on to the opinion not of all, but of those only who confessedly live according to nature. But as to those who live not so, he always bears in mind what kind of men they are both at home and from home, both by night and by day, and what they are and with what men they live an impure life. Accordingly, he does not value at all the praise which comes from such men, since they are not even satisfied with themselves. So that quote right there basically is saying that if people aren't getting the results that you're looking for in life, you don't need to listen to them. If people are miserable and they're trying to tell you how to be happy, don't listen to them. If people are poor and they're trying to give you financial advice, don't listen to them. It seems very common sense when you lay it out like that, but because of our education system, because of our social conditioning, we seem to lose touch with that common sense, and we start to put way too much importance on the unsolicited advice from our friends, family, community, and even complete strangers. And I don't know if this is relatable to you, but in my personal experience, I have found that a lot of times it's the people that I don't know as well as my own best friend or closest family members that I often fear their rejection more. And I don't know exactly where that comes from, but I think A lot of it, like I said, has to do with our cultural conditioning. And so this quote here is just a really great reminder that we absolutely do not need to be approaching life like that. So the next quote that I'm going to share is quote number 4 from book 2. Remember how long thou hast been putting off these things, and how often thou hast received an opportunity from the gods, and yet dost not use it. Thou must now at last perceive of what universe thou art a part, and of what administrator of the universe thy existence is in a flux, and that a limit of time is fixed for thee, which if thou dost not use for clearing away the clouds from thy mind, it will go, and thou will go, and it will never return. So this quote is very relevant to anyone who deals with procrastination, perfectionism, laziness, apathy, any type of issue that leads to you wasting your time and scrolling on Instagram, or just mindlessly binge watching YouTube videos that you don't even care about, or playing video games that you don't even find fun anymore, or even simply saying yes to social interactions that you don't really care about. The main thing here with this, at least in my mind, when I interpret it, is that our life is limited. We don't have forever. And we really have no idea how long we have at all, actually. And so we need to remind ourselves of that, because there is only so much that we can accomplish. And sure, you can do just about anything you want, but there's only going to be so many things that actually lead to the cultivation of empowerment, that lead to fulfillment, that lead to true, deep, and lasting meaning in your life. And so if you find yourself spending several hours a day just mindlessly scrolling on TikTok, day in and day out, a couple years go by and you have already spent an absurd amount of your life doing something that is so trivial that you have no memory of 99.9% of what you did with that time. And so this quote to me is just a very potent reminder that you're gonna die one day. You're gonna be gone, and you're gonna have this brief opportunity to look back at your life and reflect and think, did I actually do anything that was worthwhile? Did I actually make the most of the time that was given to me, the gift of life that I was given? And if we don't ask ourselves this question consistently while we are alive and while we are capable, when we finally do get forced to ask this question because our time is running out imminently, we're probably not going to like the answer that we have for ourselves. So the last quote that I'm going to share is the first quote from book number 5. And it's a very long quote, so I'm only just going to share the very first few sentences because I thought that they were profoundly impactful on my own mindset. In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into the world? So the quote basically goes on to explore in more detail the thoughts and feelings that often arise when we wake up in the morning and we just don't want to get out of bed. We're too comfortable. We just want to stay under the covers where it's nice and warm, and we don't want to go off into the world. And he draws the comparisons to other animals that just fulfill their instinctual duties and actions unwaveringly all the time, every day. And humans should really be no different, that we are here for a reason, and that it is a gift to be able to wake up every morning and go about our days as human beings. And so oftentimes, for many, many years, especially when I was a teenager, I would wake up in the morning and I wouldn't want to do anything. I would just want to roll back over and keep sleeping and keep hitting the snooze button. I didn't want to face the day. And a lot of that is a reflection of how I was actually living my life in general. I wasn't driven by a sense of purpose and meaning. I wasn't really acknowledging the gift that is this life. I was taking it all for granted, and I was basically slipping into habits of laziness and apathy and basically just being entitled. Because when you wake up and you have those feelings, unless you're genuinely tired or you're sick, if you're just sitting there because you just don't want to do anything, you're really just taking it all for granted. So those are my 3 favorite quotes from Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And there are a whole bunch of others that I probably could have put on this list because, if I'm being honest, there's an incredibly large amount of amazing quotes in here with tons of wisdom and in-depth knowledge that is contained in a very, very small, compact form. So I hope that by sharing these 3 quotes, you are now interested in going and picking up a copy of this book, because I think that it is one of the most profound and insightful books out there that we have access to in the 21st century. It has timeless wisdom that is applicable in all sorts of areas in our life, and it is very short and bite-sized that you can just fit it into your morning routine, your evening routine, any little bits throughout your day, wherever you decide to fit it in. And because each quote is so potent and so powerful, it would even be sufficient to just pick it up maybe once a week, once a month, and just focus on embodying a single quote and working on that. The uses for this book are very multifaceted, and I can't say enough how much I've enjoyed it so far. So with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Like and subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. And until then, love what is while pursuing what could be.